Hey guys, it's Samuel Larsen here from growgurus.com. Now we all know website speeds matter, but very few of us know how to optimize it, how to go about it, etc. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of the more common terminology so you can go and understand your own site speeds. Now, website speeds are a combination of so many things that this is going to be a little bit complicated sometimes. So I'll go and explain things and simplify them a little bit for you as well, so that you understand what are the metrics that you don't really need to concern yourself with. So if you still think that like website speeds are not important, here's some data from Shopify, and they are stating this, studying by Skilled, that these are the numbers that you can expect if your page loads are bad. So fast loading sites do perform better on all fronts: better user experience, higher conversions, more engagement, even higher search rankings. So if you want to gain a sustainable competitive advantage, then kind of like do what others are not willing to do and go really deep into site speeds. Make sure that your store is loading lightning fast. It's the easiest CRO trick you can do, because that way you can be 100% certain that it's going to help your store, not hurt it. But in case you are not a nerd like me, you want probably some simplicity about site speeds. So this can be a surprisingly complicated topic. You have so many variables to take into account. You have server, you have your page load, then on the other front you have your images, HTML, CSS, scripts, fonts, that kind of thing. And then if you look at your waterfall graph, for example, when you load the page, I will get to that later, you'll have your blocking, you have your sending, you have your waiting, you have your receiving. It's a lot of things to understand. So I understand like many of you might be a little bit puzzled, like where do I even start? And now this is a Shopify store optimization video for a simple reason. We are not taking a look at the server side here in this video. So the big issues for Shopify are the code, the apps, and the images. Those are the big three when optimizing Shopify stores. So let's jump into this one and get going. Now, if you already have a store set up, you have had a fair bit of traffic, and now you're looking to see how that traffic has performed, Google Analytics is by far the best resource for you. And here you can go to behavior, site speed, overview section to get an idea of the overall timings here. Now, for Shopify merchants, there are some things that you don't need to worry about, and those would be these ones. So there's one metric here, and there's 5 metrics here that you don't need to worry about, because these will be very server-related metrics. So your redirection time, domain lookup times, etc. You don't need to know that much about it, because the page load time is the most important one. However, with this page load time, we still see a lot of fluctuation, even month to month, on these, and even on big sample sizes. This is sample data, so it will not take into account all of your page loads. So if this is a low number, say here I have a month of data. If you have under this, it's a 3,000 page view sample. This starts to be okay. But definitely if you have less than 1,000, then there might be skews in that data. So a few sessions took a very long time, and that will scale it higher. So I'd be a little bit skeptical about this average number. Averages do lie. But if you want to understand how this is counted, you can always just hover over this section, and you will have the explanation here. What's more important is to understand page timings. So this way you can get an idea of the pages that could be optimized further. And what I'd recommend here is using the advanced filter and include pages that have a certain amount of page views. So in this kind of case, we'd probably look at 5,000 plus page views in this period, which is the last 28 days in this kind of case. And what I do is, you might not have this option if you don't have the plugin here. This is the one I'm using, Widget Tools by Supermetrics, to then look into this data like this. And in this kind of case, smaller is actually better. So you can see which pages are loading quick. And what you can do also here then is rank it according. So here you can see some of your problem pages. You can take a look at those to see if there's something to improve. Now, of course, not all pages are created equal. So maybe for this one, it's a quick view page, there is some complications there, it just takes a very long time to load. So you don't want to purely look at the numbers and expect everything to be the same. You need to also use your brain, and that way you'll understand what's behind the numbers better. So that's the Google Analytics part. And here, definitely only look at the pages that have a significant amount of page views. You're looking for the 80-20 here, and the ones that are slow performing don't matter. Again, they have these little question marks here. So average page load time is the average amount of time in seconds it takes for pages from the sample set to load. So it is a sample size. And they don't count all of those page views to that sample. So good to keep in mind that one as well. Now, earlier on that video, I said that the page load times lie, and let me explain what I mean by that right now. So there are a few different stages for your page loads. So in this kind of case, we can see in this example, the fully loaded time is 14.7 seconds. However, the page was already usable on the time to interactive at 7.3 seconds. So if it's a super long page, probably the rest of the page really doesn't matter that much. And then also there might be things skewing the fully loaded time, which could be like a Hotjar setup or Google Tag Manager or any kind of other tracking setups you have, which then will load later, but it has no impact to the user. So let's look at one of these examples here. This is Kylie Cosmetics, a huge Shopify store and one that I often use in my examples, not because it would be a particularly good one, but because it's a perfect example for this particular cases. So here you can see the fully loaded time just like before. I'm using gtmetrics.com here for this particular analysis. Just to illustrate the point that you would probably see a pretty long and extensive average page load time for that front page if you were to look at it from Google Analytics. But understanding this deeper is very important. So here the time to interactive is 3.2 seconds. So that is the amount of time it takes for the page to become usable. To me, time to interactive is the most important metric for site speeds, because this is what defines when the page becomes usable for the end user. So it is the perceived site speed, not the analyst's site speed when they look at the entire thing. So here's GT metrics definition, and I can share it with you if you want to pause for this one. And now something to consider here, it is a machine generated number, so it can be a little bit of misleading, but generally we found this to be very accurate. So it tends to be correct. Then let's jump back into this one, because there's a lot of different metrics, and most of them you don't need to worry about it that much. You just want those couple of North Star metrics that are your metrics to follow when you're optimizing site speeds, and then the rest of them don't really matter. So if you were to only use a few, use time to interactive, use speed index, and then as a third metric, I would use the total page size here and requests. So those can be combined. So here, like 240 requests, that's a lot of requests. So basically, your browser is pinging back and forth with the server. If you think of the server as being a waiter, like you're basically asking them to come back and forth a lot. So there, that's something to optimize for. And on good e-commerce sites, we definitely see this to be under 150. You can test your theme from the theme store to see how many there are, and then you can see how many you've added on top of it. That's a good benchmark for you to see. Of course, it won't be the exact same as it is with the theme, but if you're going to get pretty close, that's a good indication. Let's talk a little bit more about requests, because I don't want to just skip it, because this is all very useful info. Cutting the number of requests is mostly about combining CSS and JavaScript files and using things like CSS sprites for images. And here, your developer should be able to cut this number further down and perhaps explain why it is so high, and then you can come up with a number that makes sense eventually. Now for this example, the total page size is actually quite high. So here, it's generally it's a bad sign, but it's not necessarily a bad sign. You need to understand what's happening behind it. And for this one, we are going to then use the waterfall graph. Now, understandably, this can be a little bit intimidating. I made a video about this, so you can watch that later on to understand this further. But the basic idea here is that we have assets that we are loading, and then we have different responses to those assets. So, for example, in this one, we can see that the this was actually something that the server probably didn't find, or the browser didn't find, because there was a long error time. So if we were to remove these ones, we would improve the loading speeds, because this is a request that is unnecessary. Okay, so we can see like there's actually a few of these. And here, at the very end of it, we can get an idea why the page load time is so high. So here's the fully loaded time at 7.7 seconds. But as you see, like the browser barely does anything after 4.3 seconds. So there's a couple of these very small ones that is loading. You can see like it's just bytes. So very, very small assets. Here's like the last big one. This image here is like the last big image that they are loading on that page. And we can probably go and see that image somewhere, or at least we should. Because if we cannot, then it's just loading unnecessarily, which I believe in this kind of case it is loading unnecessarily. So not very good for them. I can't see the image, so not optimal. But here you can see that oftentimes it's some APIs, some apps, maybe some different tracking things that are loading later, and that's loading your own load time. What you really want to do is look at the important stuff and see how fast that is loading. And at some point, probably you can draw the conclusion that from a certain point, it's not really relevant for the user, even if the entire page is not loaded yet, since it can be used. So that's the waterfall graph in its very basic functionality. You don't need to know that much about blocking, DNS lookup, connecting SSLs, sendings, waitings, and receivings, because that's for your developer to really optimize for. What you do need to know is these kind of things. So if it's an asset that is not there, you definitely don't want to load it. And of course, if it's also an asset that is not on the page, why are we loading it? And sometimes you do see a lot of waiting time here, also known as blocking time. So these are the purple ones. These are not necessarily that problematic. However, you can look into it with your developer, since they might have some fixes, and then also be able to see that everything's loading on the right order. And then for Shopify, I mentioned that there's a few different things that can really hurt the page. So you have your HTML and JavaScript, which generally is one thing that, like as a merchant, it's more difficult to do anything about it. It's more for your developer, and then you can get quotes for that in terms of what kind of improvements you could get. For the images, I recommend that you sort them by size, and then you can go over them and see if they are loaded in the right order, and if the size of the images makes sense. Also from the HTML and all section, you can look for apps that you might have uninstalled, and see if they are still loading. So oftentimes you can see some assets here that you might not even use anymore, but they haven't completely uninstalled so far. So that's one thing that's annoying with Shopify apps. They might not completely uninstall themselves from the pages. So oftentimes you'll have things left behind. So here I'm going to show you how this page looks like when you're loading it. So you can see that like at this point, 2.5 seconds, you can already use the page. Or at least you can start reading it. So you have your menu. You're probably going to orient here a couple of seconds before you really start doing anything. So here you have your document is now interactive. And now, like for the first screen, like it's not like really the improvements to the experience are there. It's just loading the latter half of the page. So in this kind of case, it really doesn't matter that much that the page load time is long. That's pretty much that. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's a lot of CRO videos coming up. And I know like a lot of you guys would like just like a simple step-by-step. I need this number to be here. I need that number to be here. So what's the number I should have for images per page, or how much script should I have per page? Really, there is no one right answer to that. It just always depends, because every site is unique and every experience is unique as well. So that's why we are so principles driven here. So want you to also understand these things behind it, so that you can then optimize not only one page, but also understand your store. Now, I'm going to make a video about benchmarking these versus your competitors. So you can wait for that one, and you will get notified if you have subscribed, and click the notification bell for that one so you can look at that video before your competitor does. So that's a nice little benefit there. Like the video if you liked this and if you found this helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.